Hi guys, Paul here. And I love popcorn and sci-fi. Everything from Star Wars to Stargate, from Godzilla to Firefly. It doesn't matter. An action movie in a sci-fi environment, over the top, fun. I just love it. I always have since I was a kid and first walked into that theater to see Star Wars. It doesn't matter to me that the S-foils on an X-Wing don't make sense in space, or if the math ain't mathing. I just want something fun, over the top, and something that makes me feel good. Something that's just makes me excited. And recently, I managed to read a couple books back to back that lifted my spirits that way when I needed it. And spoilers, I really enjoyed them both.
Spoilers.
First, I want to talk about J.N. Chaney's 1-800 Starship. This is without a doubt an homage to the very underrated Last Starfighter movie.
Greetings, Starfighter. You have been recruited by the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada. Get ready? Prepare for blastoff.
It is popcorn sci-fi with a dash of 80s nostalgia. So let me tell you about the plot, and then we can talk more about the book. So you're introduced to Mark Allen. He is working in his Uncle Mike's diner, the Starbright Diner, and the Starbright Diner is filled with old 80s arcade games. Galaga to Pac-Man, you know the games. So Mark is working to save for college, but he doesn't know what he wants to do. He's very disillusioned, he's very unsure of his future, and that makes a great setup for a hero of this kind. But one night while he's working, he finds an old comic book. This vintage comic book seems to have no other copies, no other issues. He's never heard of it. And he sits down and reads through this story of these characters and the Nova Slingers and the heroic adventure they went on. And when he gets to the back, there's an ad. The ad is for 1-800 Starship. It has a phone number. And he's sure that this old comic book, it's obviously the phone number is not going to work. The company, whatever the gimmick was, is no longer viable, right? So on a lark, he calls the phone number. Well, lo and behold, the phone number works. And he's asked a whole bunch of questions, which he answers to the best of his ability. And they tell him that they'll be in touch and hang up. And that's that. He goes home and goes about his night. And in the morning, he gets a knock on the door. There's a strange man waiting there who just pulled up in a DeLorean. He tells him that he's there to take him because he's been accepted as a pilot in the Nova Slinger course. Mark hesitantly goes with him and is a little bit surprised when the DeLorean turns into a spaceship and heads through some space gates and takes him to another planet. And here's where he finds out that he has joined up with the Kin Federation of Worlds to become a Nova Slinger pilot and fight against the Ascendancy hive mind. He is put into a training program and meets a bunch of his other fellow squad mates, various mix of aliens from worlds he's never seen, from birds to octopuses and so on. And he makes friends and enemies as he goes through his training. Now, he's way far behind these other recruits, and he has to work harder to catch up. So there's this underlying mystery where Mark and his recruiter are the only two Earthmen on the planet, in the Nova course. And there seems to be a whole mystery revolving around that, because apparently they used to recruit from Earth all the time, and now they don't. Something happened, and they've ceased recruiting from our planet. But also, Earth pop culture is fairly well known amongst the people who are living in this facility, who are part of this culture already. Although it seems like the kin may be trying to erase all the remnants of Earth culture that had been on the facility beforehand. And so you have that mystery also running through the story. And you follow Mark as he goes through his training, makes friends and enemies. And this is not something you haven't seen before. It's similar to The Last Starfighter or Ender's Game or even Full Metal Jacket. You've seen that kind of training and learning process many times, but it was fun and enjoyable, and I could talk more about that. And you follow Mark as he's trying to catch up with the rest of the squad. They've been doing it a lot longer, and he's pretty far behind. and he needs to get some extra training and push himself a little further and a little farther than his squad mates do to get where they are. And eventually they go out on a training mission. And while they're doing this, Mark gets a signal from a planet that they're near. And he follows it down and discovers a cryosleep, a former Nova Slinger who's in like a suspended animation. And this isn't really a spoiler because in the prologue they set you up for this. And he unearths a former Earth pilot who had gone missing, Malika Iona. And she has information that is very important because there may be more going on with the Ascendancy, and it may be a more urgent situation than they first thought. So you go into the third act where you get more of the whole action scene as the squad of starfighters, Nova Slingers, start to directly interact with the Ascendancy, and you learn more about them. And you end up with a pretty action-packed ending. So let's talk about the book in a little more depth and take a look at some of the details. So you have the characters. Mark Allen is the perfect quintessential disillusioned young man who is taking a journey and can become a potential hero when he finds his true calling. It's a well-known trope, but it's a lot of fun. And I liked Mark. I think that his character will develop more into the future. The characters around him were pretty interesting. They seem to have all their own personality and be pretty fleshed out. Friends and enemies. Except for the bad guys, the Ascendancy, we don't get to know a lot about them. We just kind of skim the surface on them. They're kind of the shadowy background monster that we don't really get to know a lot about. But near the end, we get to know a little bit more. But I think this is set up for future series. And this is important because you should know going into this that this can be read as a standalone, but you're going to get a lot more out of this if you read this knowing you're going to read the series going forward. If you prepare yourself that this is a setup book. This is a book where you're getting to know the characters, where you're getting an origin story. And if you go in knowing that, it's going to be a lot better for you, because if you're expecting, to have everything solved up in a neat little bow, it's not quite going to happen. This story wraps up, so you can read this and be done. But the true benefit of this, I believe, is going to be following the characters as they grow and you learn more about this world, these characters, the bad guys, and the war that's coming. And I think that's where most of the fun's going to be. So go into this knowing that if you're going to read it. As I said, there's like some 80s nostalgia in here, and it doesn't beat you over the head with it, but it's very recognizable, and it adds to the fun if you're kind of a fan of the 80s stuff, if you grew up in that time, or just enjoy video games and comic books and movie references. It is there. It's not the only thing that's there. There's a lot more meat on this bone than just that trope, but it is part of the culture of this book, so know that going in. The middle part of the story is slow because it's an origin story. It's a training sequence as you get to know the characters, but slow doesn't mean bad or boring. I had a lot of fun, and it reads pretty fast. You get through and you're enjoying your time with these characters because it's well written and it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's comfort read. It feels very much like a popcorn comfort read. And like I said, you're best served with this, understanding that this is the beginning of what could be a long series, and you're getting to know and grow with these characters. So you can read this, like I said, as a standalone, but you're going to want to adjust your expectations to this being the beginning of a series. And I want to tell you, I am looking forward to hopefully getting my hands on book 2 and reading it. And I'm definitely going to, if I read it, come back and talk about it and tell you how the second book comes into its own, if it comes into its own, how the characters develop, if it steps away from its origins and you'll get deeper into the characters and the story. I'm definitely looking forward to reading book 2. The Last Emperor, it's called. It comes out November 30th of this year. So not long. Apparently, Chaney can write pretty quick. And yeah, definitely, if I get a hold of it, I'll be back here to talk about it. So yeah, 1-800-STARSHIP by J.N. Chaney. even if it was an origin story, getting to know you, a beginning of a series, I had a lot of fun. It was a quick read. It didn't get bogged down, even though it does go through that training sequence and that whole getting to know you period. And I had a lot of fun with it. And I'm definitely looking forward to moving on with this series and seeing what's next. So hopefully I'll be back here with book 2 and I'll be able to tell you what happens. And I want to thank Burn Enough, a fellow booktuber, who was kind enough to send this to me. And if you haven't, go check out his channel. It's a lot of fun. He does great sci-fi, military sci-fi videos. That's what his channel is about. And yeah, he was kind enough to send this to me because he knew I was interested. And I appreciate it. Thank you. And go check out his channel. And if you're into popcorn, sci-fi, spaceship, 80s nostalgia, check out 1-800-STARSHIP. So let's talk about J.J. Walsh's Lazarus Kool-Aid.
Oh, yeah. Uh-oh. Huh?
Darla Cunningham has inherited billions of dollars from her uncle, who was a computer creator, innovator from the 80s, and was responsible for a great deal of the computer landscape and innovation that had happened. And she gets to keep the billions of dollars that she inherited under one condition. Up in his attic, he has a multitude of computers that are running programs constantly that she does not understand. And she has to maintain these computers and make sure nothing happens. Most of the time that's easy. Most of the time she has to do nothing, but she checks on them and doesn't understand what's going on until that changes. Then we have our main point of view character, Henry Hubble. Henry Hubble is a lovable loser. He's kind of a background character in real life. He's a normal kind of guy who never succeeds and never fails, just kind of is stuck in nowhere. He works for an advertising agency that specializes in local used car salesmen. And these two are bound to meet. But one of the things that Henry does have in his life is his sister, who is raising her nephew by himself. And he loves his nephew. His nephew, though, is 9 years old and very sick and probably terminal. He has to live in the hospital, and he loves his nephew very much and spends as much time with him as he can. And it is probably the most important thing in Henry's life. I'm not a huge fan of children and stories, but I actually liked his nephew. He's came across as very self-aware of being the precocious child in the story, and it was really funny. He was a fun character. He was just that precocious kid that was written well and didn't grate on your nerves. He was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed the scenes where they interacted, which was a huge surprise to me. And he is very important to the story, though. We start with following Henry as he wakes up one morning. And as he wakes up, he is being attacked. He's being attacked by rag dolls with sharp teeth and butcher's knives. Doesn't understand why, and he does recognize that these rag dolls are these nostalgia toys from the 80s, and now they want to kill him. So he manages to fight off these rag dolls and defeat them. And as he does, there's a knock on the door. And that knock on the door introduces us to another character in the story who I've had a lot of fun with. It was his ex-girlfriend from high school's mom, a very English, proper, stuck in the mud, stick up the butt kind of mom character. And she hates Henry. She hated him in high school and she hates him now. But there's something weird going on because not only is she not aged since he was in high school, but she's spitting out experience point receipts for him defeating the ragdolls. This strikes him as kind of odd, understandably. And as he goes through his day, things get weirder and weirder. And Henry lacks understanding to figure out what's going on. With his nephew's help, he gains some understanding of the situation he's in And we discover that Henry's life has been gamified. His life has been turned into a live version of a role-playing game. And the protagonists and events that are happening seem to be coming from his subconscious, his experiences, and most notably, his fears. But to make the whole situation worse, the game is glitched. So with the help of his nephew, and later Darla, he has to work his way through the game to survive and be able to help his nephew. Along the way, he faces off against foes that are dredged right from his subconscious. His own fears are creating the monsters that he has to deal with in the real world. Some of the creatures that are dredged up from Henry's subconscious and his memories and his experiences are a lot of fun. They're weird and crazy and over the top, and it's just a bit of insanity. And the whole situation kind of reminded me of Jerry and Beth from Rick and Morty if they were playing a game of Zathura.
What's Zathura?
And if you don't know what Zathura is, it's the sci-fi version of Jumanji. Because they're not going into a video game. The video game has come out to them. And all of Henry's stats are being kept as tattoos on his body. And like I said, the game isn't exactly playing fair, and it's a little bit broken. And beating the game is one thing, but beating the game when it's glitched is a whole nother thing. So the book reads a little bit like a lit RPG, but more played for comedy, more for fun. It's more over the top. It's not taken seriously at all. It's just goofy, pure fun. And it has its own 80s tropes in there. It's sprinkled throughout just to give you a little taste. You're not beaten over the head with it at all. And some of the bad guys he's facing are just hilarious. They're just insanely ridiculous, and it's a lot of fun. This book is played really for comedy. It's played really for fun. It's just a good time. It's a quick read where you just go in, have a good time, have a few laughs, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. Most of the time, books like this revolve around a fantasy setting, but this definitely has more of a sci-fi vibe. It's more of a popcorn comedy sci-fi book. The characters are likable, the story's funny, the bad guys are pretty hilarious, to be honest, most of the time. And it's just something you dive into for a good time. It's a standalone, it's one single story, it's pretty short and pretty quick, and it was a lot of fun. So if you're looking for sci-fi that's full of laughs and goofiness and over-the-top fun, and you want to check out the lit RPG style book, this is done in a completely different way than any of the ones I've ever read before, and it was a good time. I'm not a big fan of books that try to be funny, that are aiming for the humor, but this hit some nice spots. Now, I'm not going to say that everything landed with me, but definitely more hit than didn't. And I just had a good time, and there were times I was literally laughing out loud. I actually did this as an audiobook, and I was listening to it back and forth in the car as I was driving to work. And on more than a few occasions, I was literally laughing out loud. The ex-girlfriend's mother character was hilarious. She was a snarky smartass, and it came across well. And the situations that presented themselves were just a lot of fun. It was goofy, but it was goofy in a good way. And it's hard for me to find a lot of books that attempt to be goofy, attempt to be fun, that work. And I think he did a good job with this. It was well written and well paced, and the characters really did come through. You had no doubt who was who and what was going on, and their personalities were persistent, and I really enjoyed them. Like I said, if I can enjoy the kid character, the tropey, precocious kid, then you're really doing something, because that's something I've seen 100 times and kind of usually roll my eyes at, but I liked this kid and I had fun with it. So I'd say, yeah, I was a little worried about doing it as an audiobook because I didn't know how it'd come across. So I think you're safe if you want to read it or do it as an audiobook. And if you're willing to go in open-minded and looking for a book with a lot of laughs and just goofy humor that touches on some 80s tropes and gaming tropes and some fun characters and fun situations that are just crazy, give this a look. You might really get a kick out of it. I was a little bit surprised at how much I did enjoy it because, like I said, I don't usually find books that are based around humor to be too enjoyable. I'm usually not able to get into them. But yeah, this ticked the right boxes. It hit the right spots, and it was real well written, and I really enjoyed it. So if this kind of thing sounds like it might be interesting to you, I'd say check it out. It's definitely worth the effort. Okay, guys, thank you for joining me on this segment of Sci-Fidelity, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you so much for being here. Remember, the secret to Zen: read books, pet dogs, and listen to metal. And please subscribe, and I will see you soon. Have a good one.